I come from like a journalism background, but now I write science fiction. We've
got a bit of a range.
Yeah, we have artists and poets, and I think a pretty wide, I guess, set of talents that come to bear on the project.
I think one thing that also drew us together is that we wanted a creative outlet. We wanted a way to be creative while also being critical. Like we're just all desiring both of those environments, especially together. So a little bit back to one point I wanted to make earlier about like the process of making the issue, and what you were talking about with like how do you find people to submit. Really looking for people that are interested in this like collaborative generation of like creative, like talking about pieces with other people and like talking about ideas and the stuff itself, as opposed to just like handing it to us. And so I think aside from like all of our professional lives or work lives or that sort of sphere, one thing that really drew us together with Oasis is this space where we could be more expressive and like unlock that emancipatory potential of art, like that sort of like freedom potential of expression, and like the creative potentialities that come out of being able to express something.
That's, I think, maybe another reason why we haven't been totally inundated with submissions is because we say very explicitly that if you send us your work and we think there's something there, we want to like work on it with you. We want to like bring you into our editorial process and try to figure out how to make it the best it can be, and also how to make it something that complements the other pieces that we're bringing together for the issue, which is a really like tough ask for writers. And I mean, I would always much prefer a place just like buy my work outright than to make a bunch of submissions or a bunch of revisions and having to like work with strangers and their process. Man, that sounds like a lot, but it means that the stuff that we do get and gets to be like really cool. So
you said there are about 12 of you. Do you all just have you found sort of natural fits as far as who's great at doing the layout and design, and who is contributing the writing itself, and then talk a little bit about that editorial process, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So just to answer your first question, people obviously have like more talent in specific realms than other people. So some people have taken a lead on different parts of the project, like designing a cover. Taylor was really good at typesetting, so was Susie, so they sort of like led that for the initial part. But people get burnt out and no one wants to get stuck doing the same thing. And also we want to build our expertise as being able to do this and distribute the knowledge more so to other people. So we've been trying to integrate more. The
other week we had a typesetting like workshop to spread the knowledge.
Those are really great. Yeah, I benefited a lot from that. So we had basically a run through of how to typeset an issue of Oasis. Taylor and Susie like walked us through, maybe 6 or 7 of us, how to do that. And then we've done that for the most recent issue. So that's been really successful in that regard. And then speaking a little bit to other talents, I think by way of being more collaborative and more engaging with each other, I think we just start to begin to think a little bit more about different modes or mediums of expression, like poetry, if we're reading poetry out loud to each other, or short stories, or editing a little bit of our stuff.
Our specific process usually involves meeting to sort of lay out dates and intentions and maybe put together call or think about sort of bat around ideas of things we might want to write about. And oftentimes, a lot of us will say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna want to write something for this issue, and sometimes it happens, and inspiration strikes, and sometimes it doesn't. But a lot of that does come out of sort of initial conversations about some particular set of core concerns. That this most recent issue that is coming out, Mirage, which is Oasis number 5, Mirage. We were originally had a bunch of conversations about being online and the virtues of logging off or not logging off, and particularly the ways in which we're forced to be in these sort of digital spaces by work a lot of the times, just sort of mixing that problem with the toxicity of social media that sometimes crops up. So that was sort of our initial call, and generated a bunch of ideas internally that I think people sort of ran with in different directions. And so once we had a bunch of material and started gathering it together and deciding what we wanted, what we liked, even quite apart from that specific theme, we sort of found a new theme, and that's this sort of idea of like receding promises and illusions and the ways we cope with that reality. So that happens over the course of a couple different meetings, right? Okay. Where we sort of come together and
it's typically like 2 meetings where we're just talking about things that we're thinking about, or things that we would like to create, or things that we have created, and just the inspiration for it, and then it sort of crystallizes into
a couple meetings of like looking at specific pieces, and then suddenly it's go time, and we have to put these things together, and so decisions get made really quickly about what's going to end up in the issue, and people bring their once they see the kind of broader theme of the issue, then some last minute sort of submissions from our editorial group will come in, and it's sort of it's a pretty hectic process in some ways, but one that like consistently generates a really interesting product.
I was typesetting the issue over the weekend. I was just like, oh, this is so great. It's like all the pieces are meshing off of each other so well.
Yeah, and I had the same experience last night writing the bookends, which is something I have done for all the issues, and it's a piece I really enjoy, but really had to think like critically about like what are mirages as like a phenomenon and a part of desert life, and how does it mesh with these pieces we have in here about about the internet and about loneliness and about dystopia and about addiction and these sorts of things that kind of glance off this mirage concept all in different ways.
So you had mentioned that you...
Oh, sorry. Can I just add one part to that?
Yeah.
Which is after the issue's created, we'll all bind it together as well.
Okay.
So we'll get together, and that was speaking a little bit to the expertise now.
Yeah.
After the first few issues, we've all had experience binding the issues, and so that makes the work a lot easier.
This all sounds very Marxist. Everybody learns how to do everything. You all work together towards putting the issue together.
There's lots of food involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very collectivist way of approaching a creative product, and that may or may not necessarily be Marxist, right? But
I think it's mostly what we strive for is collectivism.
Yeah,
kind of like
decentralized, but like sort of connected nonetheless. Yeah.
And we also have a process in there for thinking about submissions and giving editorial feedback that is a little more formal, right? I mean, we have these kinds of meetings where we discuss them, but we also ask everyone read a couple pieces and critique them and thumbs up or thumbs down them.
Gotcha.
And so that is formal enough to involve some spreadsheets and some
you can't have a publication without a good spreadsheet.
No, it's impossible.
As far as you mentioned working collaboratively with people who submit things, and what does that look like? Do you just kind of go back and forth with them? Do you read their piece initially and then supply kind of a critique, maybe some notes, and kind of how you'd like it to be shaped a little bit differently or something? How does that go?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And we send that back, and sometimes the writer works with us to either improve or kind of align their piece with what we think would be most interesting for the issue, and sometimes not, and then we'll either print it as is or not.
Gotcha. So it's essentially a conditional acceptance, and you have at that point, as the editor and the author has to decide whether or not they're going to change their work to fit what you're looking for, and you have to decide if they don't want to do it, whether or not you want it anyway. Basically,
yeah. There's that game of chicken, but I mean, it hasn't really been.
Are they going to
it hasn't
stare the headlights down, or
Yeah, because most of the time it's the pieces have been well aligned already.
Gotcha.
To the scope of the issue. In terms of like other pieces, I know, for example, like with Corpse Club, they had lots of interesting collaborative caricatures already drawn, and I think Ben maybe worked with Nathan and the other artists in Corpse Club to like find the ones that would be best suited for the issue. These like weirdly alien configurations of different objects and humanoid characters. And I think with the poetry and other paintings and digital art that we've got from other people that people inside of Oasis have known, it's been more or less the same kind of process.
Gotcha.
Yeah. A few times, we can kind of flex our editorial hand with poetry more in just like people send us a bunch of poems, and we'll pick the ones that align most closely with the issue's theme.
You mentioned one of the missions of what you guys are doing as far as being a community presence as well, and how have you achieved that? Like, what sort of programming have you done, and how are you kind of integrating with the literary community and artistic community and all that?
Yeah, I think the Sonoran Small Publisher Summit was maybe a good example of trying to build that local literary
And it sounded
community.
like that was going to be an event that you were going to do again, or is that kind of in the works to do another?
I think that was a one-time
one
thing.
and done?
Yeah. Just to sort of like generate some initial connections among people. It was really successful. I think there were maybe 20 attendants there, from Flagstaff to Tucson. Lots of presses, individual artists, different like people. There was one guy who was really into hand-bound books that were really beautiful. Other artists and illustrators and binders and these types of things.
Well, and how? I'm sorry to interrupt, but then how does that initial, coming together of people turn into something? Are any of those connections maintained? Do you have some sort of network built?
I think we're still. I mean, we're still looking to try to facilitate this and be active and participate in it. I think it's hard because it doesn't really exist right now.
Yeah.
Which was maybe one of the main conclusions of the Small Publisher Summit, was that was one of the first times perhaps that something of that scale had happened in the Valley. Maybe speaking to your point earlier, but it was really hard to find other people aligned with your interests and your sort of vision for Phoenix. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, well, I guess a few other things we've done. We try to table at wherever the literary community might be, and there's a good number of those opportunities every year from like Piper Center events,